Midnight ski in the woods. This was a few years back when I used to smoke the reefer. I was under 21, so weed was the natural go-to for my friends and I, even though I get pretty paranoid from it. One random night in mid-January, like a Tuesday or something, my buddy and I decided to go blaze at the Metro Parks. The Metro Parks are a large natural reservation link of forest that lines many Cleveland, Ohio suburbs. Within the several square miles of the Metro Parks, people can bike, horseback ride, fish, etc. During the daytime, it's beautiful. At night, however, the Metro Parks are officially closed, with the only deterrents to keep scumbag teenagers and the like out are the 2 or 3 park rangers that patrol the vast land. Being a natural reservation with absolutely no electricity, when nighttime falls, the place is dark. So, being the bored stoners that we were, my buddy Jerry and I decided to smoke up and walk to a location in the parks called Squaw Rock. It's an awesome location down by a river and is a great place to take a date or just hang out with friends outdoors. From the nearest parking lot, you still need to walk and hike about 15 minutes to get to it. We park my SUV and look for the trail to Squaw Rock. We are in the only car in this isolated parking lot. The total silence of the winter forest is only broken by the sound of our boots crunching the snow. So here we are, Jerry and I smoking, laughing, and walking the Squaw Park in the middle of the night. It's the dead of winter in Ohio, and thanks to the full moon reflecting on the fresh snow, our visibility is decent. I could easily see about 30 feet ahead of me in all directions, but total darkness further than that. We're walking in a narrow trail that follows the river. On our left is a deep ravine towards the river. On our right is a very steep incline back up to the ground level. While walking side by side, Jerry stops dead in his tracks and whispers, "Shh, dude, I heard something." I stop too and tell him it's probably a deer or something. I start walking again for just a moment, and swoosh, crack! Jerry and I both scream like little girls as a dark figure flies down from the steep incline on our right and lands on the trail 10 feet in front of us. I adjust my eyes and start to see a woman. In the pale moonlight, she looks like a fucking witch. She has dark eyes, long white grayish hair, and looks to be in her 50s. She's also dressed in a black snowsuit. I look down at her feet and notice she's fucking skiing. That's right, she's skiing by herself in the middle of the forest, miles from civilization after midnight on a Tuesday in January. Apparently, she was coming down the steep hill to the right of us, scattered with trees, mind you, saw us at the last second, panicked, and fell onto the trail. At this point, my stoned and paranoid brain is trying to process what I'm seeing. I'm truly freaked out. The Blair Witch on skis then quickly gets up and stares at us. The expression on her face is a cross between perplexed and angry, but not the least startled. Jerry asked her if she's okay. "Yes, fine," she replies in a slightly aggressive voice. Saying nothing else to us, she begins to make her way down to the river, the same place we were planning to go to. Jerry and I look at each other for a brief moment. I knew we were thinking the exact same thing. A combination of did that just happen and what the fuck? We decided to quickly nope out of there and leave the park. To this day, I can't seem to wrap my mind around my Blair Witch ski encounter. Late night ride. This happened 2 summers ago, if I remember correctly. I was driving back home one night from my girlfriend's house. A very routine drive for me. As I'm passing a well-lit intersection, I notice an older lady, probably mid-40s, at a bus stop with 2 kids. It is well past midnight at this time, so I'm certain buses aren't running anymore. As I drive past them, I start to feel really guilty that this family was, in all likelihood, going to have to walk home in an area that's not very safe. At the following intersection, I decide I wasn't going to let that happen, so I make a U-turn and pull up next to the stop. I roll down my window and let the lady know that the buses are no longer running and that she should probably call a taxi. She tells me she has no money for a taxi and asked if I could please give her and the kids a ride home. I didn't get one of those gut feelings to say no, so I obliged. Before getting into the car, she asked if it's okay if her little boy could sit in the front seat since the back made him sick. I thought this was a little strange, but car sickness can happen, so I figured it was better than having someone vomit in the car. She tells me where she lives and I head that way. As we're talking, the little boy begins to giggle quite a bit for no reason. I figured he's just a little odd. He then starts to giggle more noticeably. I look over at him in the passenger seat, only to bear witness to a sinister, maniacal look in his eyes. At this point, his giggle has turned into more of a cackle. All the while, the lady is talking to me like she doesn't even hear him or something. Then, it all hit me. What the fuck was I thinking? My back was turned to this stranger. She could have strangled me with a plastic bag or a wire at any of the red lights we hit. There was nothing I could do at this point, except stay alert and hope that the boy would just shut up. I had never felt so helpless. He quiets down as she lets me know that we are very close to her house. She then tells me to pull into a bank parking lot, and I ask her why, since all I wanted was to be in the safety of my own home. She points towards the parking lot and says, "That's our home." They lived in an old RV. She thanks me and they get off. As I drove away, all I could feel was relief, remnants of fear, and most of all, sadness. The Mask. This encounter happened to me a while ago. I couldn't share it for a long time. For some background information, I live in the county of Ohio. Down a long drive, fields on two sides, woods in the back. I'm about a mile away from town, so if I need police, I have to call the sheriff. I live with my husband and Boxer. The night this happened, my husband was getting some overtime at his factory. It was a Saturday night, and he was working third shift. I had spent the evenings at my parents' house and did not head home until around midnight. I stopped in town at our 24-hour gas station to get some drinks and chocolate and a beef jerky for my dog. As I exit the gas station, I get this feeling that's so strong I just look around because I knew someone was outside with me. Over to my left, about 20 feet away, is a girl in a really cute little dress with a white horse mask on, just standing there. We stared at each other for a minute before I hopped into my car and quickly pulled out onto the road, almost hitting a light pole as I belatedly checked my back seat for danger. That was unnerving, but I was home just a few minutes later, giving my dog jerky and eating chocolate and watching TV. All of a sudden, my dog takes off down the hall to the back porch, barking and growling and attacking the window. I run in there, afraid a window was gonna get broken again. My dog broke a window trying to get a coyote once already, and I stop, dead in my tracks. There, standing at the window, is a horse mask. Again, we stared at each other. I looked over to the back door. Was it locked? Shit, I couldn't remember. Horse mask looks over at the door. Slowly, I walk over to it. So does horse mask. We both reach for the knob. It was locked. Horse mask looks behind her, and for the first time, I look around my backyard. There is a guy in a horse mask, too. I'm like, okay, this is enough. I'm calling the cops. I got my dog, shut the door to the porch, and went to the living room to get my cell phone, of course. I left my phone in the car when I carried my stuff in the house. In my car that's in my garage. My dark garage. Basically lacking any choice, I opened the door to the garage and tried to open my car door, but oh, guess what? I must have locked it, and I didn't have the keys. I crept back into my house. No sign of my dog, no horse mask in the backyard that I could see from the kitchen window. I grabbed my keys and got the phone. I called the sheriff and told them what happened. It was that I was followed home and I was alone. They asked if they were still outside. I looked out the window room by room, nothing. Until I got to my front yard. Right out front, there they were, just standing about 100 feet away, holding hands, staring. I honestly was crying at this point to the dispatcher, who assured me someone would be there soon. As I stood there clearly on the phone, the girl waved. Then they walked hand in hand down my lane, out of sight. It took the sheriff 10 minutes to get there. They found nothing. Told me the guy probably sat in the car and they just followed me. Just kids being kids, they said. My dog didn't come out of my bedroom the rest of the night. I sat up listening to silence until my husband got home. A couple weeks later, someone from the sheriff stopped by to follow up. They said they checked the cameras at the gas station, but all it shows is the girl walk up by the dumpsters and stand there until I left, and she walks away. True creepy night shift. That's a true story that happened to me years ago. I'm from Germany and worked at an old people's home in a little German town at the time. The facility was in a rural area on the outskirts of town. One night, I had night shifts with a new coworker I'd never worked before. He was in the mid-50s, wearing little round glasses, and for some reason seemed a little strange to me on the first sight. There's always only were 2 workers alone in the facility at night, and our job was to watch over 100 rooms and dwellers on 3 floors and make control rounds through the whole facility. We weren't allowed to use the elevators for security reasons at night and had to use the stairways instead. I remember the strange weather that night. It was stormy and wild outside while my shift started at about 10 p.m. at night. At this time, most of the people were gone. Only one older nurse was in the station room on the 2nd floor, where we had our headquarters at night. She wasn't used to the newer PC programs, and it took her longer to finish her writing stuff. So me and my coworker started our first round throughout the house, using the stairways, which had heavy doors we had to close slowly and carefully every time to avoid noises. Everything was quiet. Most old people were sleeping already, and after we checked all the rooms, we sat down in the 2nd floor station room and finished some paperwork. The old nurse was gone, all doors to the outside shut, and the house was completely quiet when we were sitting on the table. After 15 minutes sitting in the silence, suddenly a heavy door in the stairway was smashed hard. We looked at each other without saying anything and immediately run to the stairway. I run up the 3rd floor, and my workmate sprinted down on the ground floor. We saw nothing and nobody. We even checked the stairway windows. All were closed. Someone must have been in the stairway, we concluded. As we found nothing, we continued our tour, starting from the 3rd floor down to the ground floor. From there, I could not stop thinking who the hell would sneak around the floors in the middle of the night. It was about 2 a.m. in the morning when we had to change the double sheets from an old invalid man who pissed in his bed. I stood in the corner of the room besides the bed, backed up against the wall. My coworker was on the other side of the bed. I remember me watching the door, waiting for someone to peer into the room, while I was concentrating on the door and lost in my thoughts. Suddenly, my coworker freaked out, screaming at the old man out of nothing, ripping around the sheets and tossing around the old man. His face got an angry, creepy look to it, and I was totally shocked and not able to say or do anything. I just watched this creepy guy in front of me with the totally black windows behind him, and the door leading to the dark floors where some creep sneaked around unseen. I stood there, pressed on the wall in the corner of that room, and felt totally lost, surrounded by psychopaths. We finally reached the ground floor, and everything was quiet, only the wind blowing around the house. Suddenly, we heard the sound of something dropping, like someone dropped a knife or something metallic. The sound came from the kitchen area. We run to the closed glass door where the sound came from. It was a long dark hallway with a back door leading to the trash cans and parking lot at the end. We opened the door and searched every single room. I felt extremely uncomfortable and expected an attack at any moment. Again, we found nothing. Some hours later, we started our last tour for the night. We split up this time, and I checked the rooms like usual. When I looked into one room, an old lady was awake and sitting on her bed. She asked me if I was in her room 5 minutes ago. I said no, and that we just started our tour. She told me that 5 minutes ago, she clearly heard someone entering her room. She asked who was there, but didn't get any answers back. Then, the door was closed again. I got an extremely creepy feeling while listening to this old lady, and just her talking. I told her blatantly just to push the alarm button next time something like this ever happens again. I think it is unnecessary to say how I felt for the next hours of the night every time I entered a room or walked around a corner. I expected at any moment some weird stranger standing there all the time. I was more than glad when this damn shift was finally over. Eventually, some days later, I met the old nurse who left the facility late at night and told her this whole story. She told me that the back door to the kitchen area was wide open when she went to her car that night she left us. She reached the open dark back door from the parking lot and called if somebody is there. Suddenly, at that moment, she got a very, very bad feeling, so she turned around and ran to her car and drove off really fast. She said she was totally scared and tried to reach and warn us but couldn't find the number. I told her that the back door was definitely closed when we checked the area. So in conclusion, we never found out what creepy freaks sneaked around there at night, and on many nights, shift worker reported similar experiences the following month. The coworker I had to work with that night was fired after more and more complaints about his personality emerged over time. Anyways, that's another story completely and not relevant. Anyways, I'm glad I don't have to work there anymore, and never will make any night shifts again. My roommates aren't laughing at me anymore. About 5 months ago, a friend of mine got expelled from his program because of bad marks. He was only halfway through his lease, and he didn't see a point of staying in the city since he was only here for school. He told me that if I wanted to take over his lease as a subletter, he would only charge me half of the rent, which I thought was a pretty sweet deal. So naturally, although I am from this town, I thought it was time to leave my parents' place. I had already graduated, and although I had been looking for a new job for a while, I still felt like I couldn't miss out on the opportunity. So, I took over his lease and moved into his place. The house itself was actually pretty nice. It's 3 floors including the basement, and it's located near the university of my town, which is not a very safe area overall, but I spent a lot of my university years here, and never felt unsafe. The room in the basement is pretty small but cozy, and the only other room down here is a girl who is currently a student, and she's pretty quiet. Actually, all the girls living here are pretty good roommates. I wasn't thrilled about living with 3 girls, but now I don't see why I would have thought it was an issue. They're all pretty great and a good time. I'm the only one in this house who's not a student, and also the only one who is originally from this town. The other roommates are all actually from cities that are about an hour or 2 away at most, so unless there's something special going on, they all go home on weekends. My friend who got expelled also lives 2 hours away, so he would always go home for the weekend as well. One thing I forgot to mention, which is pretty crucial to the story, is that the house actually has 5 rooms, but right when they all moved into the new place together, one of the girls had a seizure on her bed and passed away. This was pretty upsetting for everyone, and the landlord told them not to worry about finding anyone else. Their rent never went up or anything, and the room was left vacant. According to the landlord, he just found it insensitive to try and find someone because he didn't want to turn someone's death into a financial inconvenience for him. So after the girl's death, the parents came and took her belongings out of the room, and it just remained empty since then. I actually never looked in there because it would just remain locked, and I don't really have much curiosity to see the room. It is on the 2nd floor, and I never go up there, so I never paid any attention to it. The first weekend I spent there was pretty uneventful. I remember that I spent one night at my boyfriend's place, and then the next night he slept over after we went out drinking at one of the college bars near the place. We were pretty wasted, so we passed out as soon as we got home. The next weekend, I was at home in my new room and I couldn't sleep, so I decided to read a little bit. I was really enjoying the quietness of this new house, since the girls weren't home at all. I come from a Latino family, so this quiet and serene environment was pretty rare. I thought that I heard a few noises upstairs, so I figured that one of the girls had probably decided to stay the weekend at the house, or she was just getting last-minute things ready before heading home. I really didn't think much of this thing. I wasn't very close with the roommates, so I didn't even bother asking them if any of them had stayed home. I just felt like it was none of my business. The girl in the basement was for sure gone for the weekend, because she apparently sleeps with her door locked and keeps it open when she's not home. One weekend that same month, I woke up to pee, and I could hear a toilet flushing upstairs, which was kind of weird, since I knew that none of the girls were home. I was going to go check it out, but in my tired state, I was just too lazy and just didn't care enough. It's funny. Horror movies in general are supposed to make you paranoid. But the biggest lesson I got was that there's always a rational explanation for things. And I guess I was right. This would prove to be my biggest mistake, because for a couple months I was always brushing things off, and ironically, creating irrational explanations to rationalize what I thought were irrational thoughts. Get it? For example, I heard creaking coming from the 2nd floor, and figured one of the girls must have forgotten something, and decided to come by to pick it up. The girl must have driven 2 hours down, and 2 hours back to her town in the middle of the night to pick something up. One Saturday, I woke up to get some water, and I noticed that the roommate in the basement was gone. Her door was open, and her car was not in the driveway. There weren't any cars in the driveway, but I should mention that one of the girls doesn't drive. A couple hours later, I woke up because I heard steps coming down into the basement. At this point, I yelled at the girl's name who doesn't drive, because she's the only one who could have been in the house. I didn't get a reply, and just heard the steps going back upstairs. At this point, I started getting uneasy about being home on weekends, so I decided to just spend them at my boyfriend's house. One of the girls made a house Facebook page which was supposed to address any issues like washing dishes or leaving messes, but it remained pretty inactive since everyone seemed to get along. I posted on there that some creepy stuff was happening on weekends and asked them if they could start letting me know if they'd be home or for the night or not. They seriously thought I was joking around. The replies were not receptive at all and consisted of "Lamau" or "Oh my god, you're so funny." Even my boyfriend agreed that I was being paranoid because he too believed that everything has a rational and perfect explanation. The thing is, when you say that everything has an explanation, you're only invalidating paranormal explanations or ghostly activity, which is not what I was implying at all. I have never believed in ghosts or spirits or any of that jazz, and I never claimed so. When I spoke to my roommates or to my boyfriend, they kept on saying that the house was old and made noises. But I know the difference between old house noises and someone walking down the stairs and back up the stairs. Fortunately, my roommates did start posting things on the Facebook page to let me know when they'd be gone. It was always to the effect of, "Hey, LOL, I won't be home this weekend, so don't worry about the ghosts." One weekend, they all let me know that they would not be home, and my boyfriend was on the midnight shift, so I had to spend the night on my own. My boyfriend called me on his break, and while I was on the phone with him, I heard noises on the main floor. I told him I was going to check it out, and he told me to go ahead because the motherfucker still thought I was being paranoid. As I said this, I heard the footsteps going back up to the second floor. Once I got onto the main floor, there was nobody in the kitchen, and all the doors in the house were locked. I was extremely paranoid and did not feel safe. My boyfriend calmed me down and convinced me that everything was okay. So I never went to the second floor, and it's probably best that I stayed on the main floor. After that weekend, I told my roommates in all seriousness that I was convinced that someone had been inside our house at some point that night. I told them what I heard, and the fucking bitches still claim that it was the old house making noises. My boyfriend was almost permanently on midnights, so I did what I never wanted to do and started spending weekends at my parents' place. The girls still posted on the page whether or not they'd be leaving the house or not, and I decided that I should do the same, so I started posting when I was and was not sleeping at the house. One Friday night, the Facebook page looked something like this. Roommate 1, not sleeping at home. Roommate 2, not sleeping at home. Roommate 3, staying home because of midterm exams. Me, I'm staying at my parents' place. The next morning, I received a frantic text from one of my roommates saying that the roommate with the midterm exams had been attacked. Apparently, she was in her room studying and heard a noise right outside of her bedroom. When she went to inspect it, she was greeted by a man walking out of the dead girl's room. I later found out more details about the whole thing from the roommate who was attacked. The man looked rough, greasy hair, and just a dirty, dirty face. When they made eye contact, he held his finger up to his mouth and uttered a shh while smiling. The nail on his finger was long, and his beard was apparently really straggly and uneven, like it only grew on certain parts of his face. She screamed out of instinct, even though she knew there was nobody in the house. He lunged at her as she tried to shut the door, and she wasn't beaten up too badly. He just growled and told her to shut her mouth and said something like, "I'm not gonna rape you, you shut your mouth." He beat her, but not completely unconscious, and then when he walked out of her room, he went downstairs and walked out the front door. So he left the dead girl's room unlocked. My roommate locked herself in her room and called the police, who were there immediately. What's creepy about the whole thing is that when they inspected the dead girl's room, they kept asking for clarification. So nobody has lived in this room for how long? Nobody has been renting this room, right? Did the parents take everything after the girl passed away? The guy had a really sweet setup actually, and had brought his own small mattress to put over the bed frame. Obviously the mattress was too small for the bed frame. He left most of his stuff because he probably didn't expect a confrontation that night. I don't think he knew she would be there that night because she never was. It probably sucked for him when I moved in because before me, the bastard had the whole house to himself 2 days a week. The police did ask me quite a lot of questions and were very interested in hearing my statement, especially about hearing footsteps at night. My 3 roommates and my friend are now convinced that maybe the girl didn't die the way they said she did, and maybe he murdered her. But I think the autopsy would have been able to distinguish a murder from a seizure. In their defense, the whole thing is really creepy. We're not really sure how long the guy had been living there, but it's very likely that it had been at least a few months. The theory is that the guy has been climbing in through the window, so it's possible that he was even there at times when all of us were there. The police are really interested in talking to the landlord because they want to know how the man found out about the vacant room. The landlord is a pretty decent guy, so I don't know if there's anything going on there. I don't even feel a "I told you so" attitude from this whole thing. I think that I am just glad that the girl is okay, because she seemed pretty shaken up. I just wish people were more willing to listen to me when I told them that I thought somebody was coming into our home. I even said it might be a squatter, which everyone laughed at. This happened very recently, so it might be a while before an update. As of now, the man has not been found, but the police remain optimistic about finding him, whatever that means. This has been a pretty terrible month for me, and I don't know if I want to be at this house anymore. I don't have much left on the lease, and I recently lost my job, so it might be best for me to leave the place now. I doubt the guy will come back because all of his stuff has been taken out, but I still find it creepy in this house. I definitely don't spend weekends here anymore.